Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I am Reverend Grenetta Briggs Mason, aka Reverend G. I'm here with you every Monday night on WEMS Radio Live from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. You can catch us on Facebook, on YouTube, or the WEMS app. I come each week bringing you spiritual conversations with guests from all walks of life, from different perspectives. And we talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. How does it work in your life every day? What can you use? What practices can support you as you navigate your way through life? One of the things for me that I always talk about is the spiritual toolkit. And what practices do you have in your personal spiritual toolkit? So I like when my guests come on and share their practices because we get to learn new practices and we also get to try different things. You can find me every day on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason and on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. I'm also on YouTube. So follow me. And my motto and the thing that I work best at and that I'm always excited to share is that my goal is to support you in having joy and living your best life with grace and ease throughout this journey. Tonight, I have a very special guest. My guest tonight is Monica Monfrey. Monica is many things, right? I know that she's a teacher, she's a business coach, she is a course creator, she's a social media strategist. She just has so many skills. And I'm excited to have her here to share with us all the things that she's doing. Monica is also the founder of Teach Wealthy Coaching, which is a coaching service that supports entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. So we have some exciting information to share tonight. Hey, Monica.
Hi, Reverend G. How are you?
I am good. Welcome. So I gave you all these titles, all these things that you do, right? Introduce yourself to everybody, Monica.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I am a creative business strategist, like you said, who helps women launch, get visible, and grow.
Mhm.
And when I'm not doing that, I actually teach high school in Brooklyn, New York, as a literature teacher. I've been teaching for over 15 years.
Oh,
And little side hustle that I don't really do as much anymore, but I am also a yoga teacher, certified. But I
okay.
don't really like the pandemic has definitely changed how we all practice yoga. So,
Mhm.
but I'm so excited to be here and I'm so excited to talk about all the things, whether it's business building or talking about education, all the things.
Yes, it's so many things. Well, let's see. Let's start here. So, you mentioned that you're a literature teacher, right? 15 years. And so, when I introduced you, I was like, she's a boss lady, right? So, talk about how got from teaching for 15 years to where you're now supporting women and starting and launching their business.
Yeah, I don't want to say it was a natural transition, but it happened because I was teaching yoga and then the pandemic happened and lots of other changes in my life. And I just realized I wanted to do something more. I was talking about self care for a long time with teachers. That wasn't really the thing that was lighting me up. It wasn't the thing that was bringing me passion. But I was using Instagram and so many people ask me like, how do you get visible on Instagram?
Mhm.
And that was the journey of they say the journey of 1,000 feet begins with one step. And my
Mhm.
first step was to start talking about social media and Instagram. And from there, it just really exploded this past year and really changed the trajectory of my side hustle and
Mhm.
really what's happening in my own life. And I'm still teaching. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to talk to the students that I have who maybe aren't interested in going to college or not sure what they want to do next and talk about how you don't have to always go and get a degree. You can sometimes start with the thing that lights you up. And once you know what you want, to really dive into that. I did it a little bit reverse, but I
Mhm.
love talking about entrepreneurship with my students. And, I even wrote a lesson plan all about Pharrell's Black Entrepreneur song, because I think it's so important
Mm.
that they recognize their power and their ability to create income for themselves.
I like that because, we pretty much put our kids in like this trajectory. Like, you do this, you go to high school, you go to college, right? And not tap into their natural abilities. And now you're seeing more and more kid entrepreneurs. You're seeing a
Yes.
lot more of that happening where kids are now having the opportunity really to take their ideas and create them. And I love that you're teaching kids at an early age to explore that. And I know a part of you too is about creativity. So I think that all that comes together. So I really love
Yeah.
that. The name, how did you come up with the name? Because you think, it's like wealthy, but then it's wealthy, right?
Yeah.
How did you come up with that name?
It was a part of it, really comes from when I was teaching yoga.
Oh, okay.
So for those people who can't see it spelled, it's spelled Wellthy. Um, to really focus on wellness and healthy living as educators. When I was teaching yoga, I was the wealthy teacher, a play on being an educator, being in the yoga space, which was really about health and wellness.
Mm.
And I I did change my name because one of my tips on Instagram is never to be as cute as you can be clear. And I kept on having to spell the name correctly for people. So I'm just
Mm.
Monica Monfrey on Instagram, but I decided to take part of this with me when I'm, talking about the name of my company. So it's Teach Wealthy. And it's, to me, it's a play on words. I'm also a literature teacher, like we've said a couple of times. So like
Mhm.
words are fun. So this idea that you're learning, I'm teaching other women, I'm sharing with them not only how to be well as a wellness person and to be well in your business, because so many times we're running a business and we end up hating it because we're hustling all the time.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
But also, I want women to be wealthy, that other version of that, and that there's nothing wrong with making money. And I was so excited this year when I ran my numbers and it was six figures as a
Mhm.
side hustle.
It's a side
And so,
hustle. Right, yeah.
yeah. So, and that doesn't mean I'm wealthy yet because, right, I invested a lot of money in myself. But I think that there's this nice thing that we can talk about how to be well and also
Mhm.
how to start to create generational wealth, especially for women in our spaces and in this world and during this like very uncertain time.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think that's really important now is as we shift out of COVID, you're seeing more people interested in starting their own businesses and becoming entrepreneurs. So you're
Yeah.
definitely seeing a shift in that. I can see how your business can change from that.
And
Um,
it's so important because, you know, even if we like I work 9 to 5 still, I'm gonna go back and teach next year. But it doesn't mean that we can't have this other side hustle, that you can't have something to help you create new streams of income. Most millionaires have 7 streams of income. So if there's this is the perfect time to think about what to do next or
mhm,
on the side.
yeah, the multiple streams of income. And it does take a lot to be able to go to your job every day and do your 9 to 5 and then do your side hustle as you call it. I like that, right? Because but at a point I think you get to like merge them. And you've been teaching for 15 years, right? And I think you love teaching with the kids and working with them, but I can see how that might once these the more how you would balance the two. Will you still continue to teach? I guess I'm thinking about, right?
Yeah, I brought it up to my school, like how can we start to incorporate the things that I'm doing into our school days? How can we talk a lot about I work at a transfer school, so my students are
Okay.
overage and
Oh, okay.
undercredited.
Oh,
How can
okay.
we start to prep our students so that when they graduate, they don't have to do a minimum wage job? They could actually become the cosmetologist that they want to, or do the hair that they want to, or do makeup
Mm,
or do fashion, because they'll already know how to market themselves on social media. They'll already know how to
mm,
create contracts. They'll
mm,
already know how to, it took me a long time to raise my prices. They'll already know that they're
mm,
worthy of high prices, that they're worthy of whatever they want to ask for. It doesn't matter how old they are, how much experience they have or what their race, their gender, their ethnicity is, they are worthy as a human who's doing this amazing work, and that their creativity matters. Because so often we tell young people,
Mhm.
teenagers, and you have to be more experienced. And I have so many of my students are writing music and they're rapping and they're showing up. And I want them to know that so they don't get taken advantage of. So they don't become one of the one hit wonders who lost all of their money because they didn't sign a good
Right.
contract.
Exactly, and that is really important too. Teaching those financial skills at an early age and being able to understand where your money is going. You need a business manager, a financial manager, but you need to also understand what they're doing and what they're doing with your money. So it's great having teaching them all of those skills. When you said transfer school, I work at Educational Opportunity Center, and we like your students to come to our school, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
what's nice about it is too is having the options and the different opportunities available for the students is really important. Also, I am hot today. I just want to say, right?
it is so hot outside. It's so, so hot.
I just am, and I'm still hot, right? So yeah, I think that it's really great. I really love that because how do we just give back? How do we give to the future generation? What is it that we want them to know? You talked about wealth building. We talk about financial skills. We talk about opening up a whole new world for them to explore and be creative and have options. So I really do like that part of the whole program. And also, I really love that you're saying, here's what I love, school. How can I support you in doing and things that I love to do at this transition, where you're able to go to the school and say, here's what I can provide now, and have them embrace that. So that's really, really cool. Now let's skip a little bit and talk about your spiritual journey. So, we talk about everything. And I'll just say, I won't talk so much. Talk about, how you grew up, what's religion in your life, and where you are now in terms of spirituality and religion.
Yeah. I mean, I was raised Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Um, my dad was in the Knights of Columbus, and my mom, we always sat in the front pew at church, and I was an altar girl. Went to the Catholic school till I was in sixth grade and did all of the confirmation, and definitely had, really enjoyed the mystical part of being Catholic and some of the history of it. And even when I moved to New York, I was 22 to go to graduate school, and I was really interested in how the Judeo-Christian religions work together. So Judaism and Islam, and I even thought about going to graduate school for a while to really study how Catholicism and Judaism coexist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like we kind of go up and down. And for me, I don't practice Catholicism anymore,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of like I don't always agree with what's happening in the church that I grew up in, and but at the same time I believe so much in this idea of spiritualness, and that so
Mm-hmm.
many of our religions have similar, they call us to do similar things, to love each other, to do what's right for each other, to help our neighbors out. And one of the reasons why I loved yoga so much and why I still love yoga is it also is based in a spiritual practice. um, and so part of me has been like, just there's so many amazing ways to be spiritual, and so I'm always moved whenever the music for me is what moves me. So wherever I am, whenever I enter into any temple or into any church or any synagogue or any mosque, it's always like, and I shouldn't say a mosque, I actually haven't ever entered into a mosque, but walking by and hearing the calls to prayer, just seeing how in every single religion, I really find that there is this beauty in the sound, in the music, and then also the beauty of stillness. What do we do when the music isn't playing? How do we find those moments? So for me, I feel like I'm so spiritual, but
Mm-hmm.
no longer necessarily in that particular place I remember growing up, I'm getting married in August, and that might be
Oh,
news to you.
congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm getting married outside, but I think back to when I was, in second grade and third grade. I used to imagine this wedding that was so different than what it is now, because in my
Mm,
head I had only been taught, like, this is how you get married. This
okay.
is what a marriage looks, this is what a wedding looks like. And so it's interesting to explore, as I've become exposed to more spiritual practices, how that
Mhm,
can look different. And it
mhm.
doesn't mean that what I grew up with is wrong or better. It's just different.
Different, right? Exactly. I think we all kind of expand and grow, and I think some of it we keep too, because I think that, as you said, you enjoyed it while you were doing it, so the basis of it is there, and not believing in all the practices and the principles doesn't make it wrong. Like you say, and you're not saying that it's not okay for religion to be religion, but how you interact with it and how it works for you in your life. Yeah, and that's pretty cool, because for me too, I didn't know anything but Christianity until I studied all the different religions. And it's pretty fascinating, right?
Yeah.
To study all of the different religions and understand, that it's all, everybody's going for the same thing, right?
It's like the
Um,
similarities are always there. Even when I was in college, I studied Native American environmental philosophy.
mhm,
And it was just so interesting to even hear how I'm from Wisconsin. So there's lots of Native American tribes there. To
mhm.
even think about the creation story inside of the native story is so similar to the creation story inside of
Exactly.
the Bible. And then I'm also a dancer, and I studied dance. And just when you start
Mm,
to do, I brought a West African instructor when I was teaching here in New York City,
mhm.
and just talking about the different stories that are told through dance that are rooted in religion reminds me of liturgical dance and just the ideas that we all move in this way. So I find that there's something so interesting and so innate and so grounded in the core, which is what yoga is really, this idea of groundedness in the core. So it's always been a part of my business to be well, and also to remember that, like, that wellness is not just mind, it's not just body, but it's also soul and spirit.
Mhm. Mind, body, and spirit. So you're a dancer. Oh, tell us a little bit about your dance experience. You were a dancer as a kid, or?
Yeah, as a dancer as a kid, and then I went to college. I have a minor in dance, and I even taught for 2 years
Mm.
here in New York City. My fiance, he's the much better dancer. To me, I love to watch. I love watching it, and it's a part of who I am, and it's a part of how I
Mm.
move. Students will always say to me, "Miss, were you a choreographer back?" Because I have this sense, even when I'm like walking around the classroom
Mhm.
pre-COVID.
Right.
I felt like, we're not supposed to walk around anymore. But
Right.
I felt like I was sometimes moving in a specific way. And, it was part of what I think brought me joy as a teacher, was this, how can I maneuver through the different desks, and having a rhythm to the day is really important. So I don't think I've ever lost those aspects of being a dancer. They just appear differently in the work I do now.
That's interesting, because I say I always have music in my head, right? Because I love music and singing. So, and sometimes I'll break out in song, right? And Jazzy, my daughter's always like, "Please don't break out in song," right? So don't answer questions in song. But I understand when you said, I bet if I were in the classroom, I would move in a certain rhythm.
Yeah.
Also, that's really cool to have studied dance and all the creative aspects of that are part of your life that you can incorporate into everything that you do, which is really um, beautiful to see. Now, you brought something to mind when you was like, as a teacher in the classroom. Let's talk about COVID as a teacher,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
She's like, oh, here we go, right? I
It's
mean,
okay.
and just from like a teacher perspective, right? Because there are so many perspectives. I talk about, you can look at this station, there's three different things going on. You have to really figure out what's true for you and what works for you, because there's so much information coming in from so many different directions, right? And so it's interesting to hear from you as a teacher in New York City. You dealt with the whole COVID thing from jump, right? Give
Yeah.
us a little bit of that experience for you from jump till now. Look at me from jump till now, right?
Yeah, I remember it was Friday the 13th. We had a meeting and we
Mm,
said, and I mean, COVID happened at a pretty difficult time for me personally. My sister started to make her transition from having breast cancer into moving
mm,
on in the
mm,
world. So COVID has this very different thing, but it was always, you know, I never expected us to be where we are. Now we kind of all thought it was going to be something quick. I think what's hardest for me is we're all in a rush to get back to what quote unquote normal was. And I just worry and I wish that maybe it was that one moment in education that we could have thought about, is this really working? Is
mm,
this the
mm.
system that we created over 100 years ago to help assimilate immigrants into our country? Was it really working? Like, did we miss this? Like, I don't want to say it's a beautiful moment because nothing about COVID was beautiful. I actually had it. Nothing
Mhm.
about it is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mhm.
Did we miss this moment when we could have, with all of the different things that our country has faced in the last year with George Floyd's murder and with Black Lives Matter and with just Asian hate and just all the things? Did we miss a moment when we could have revamped our society and really done something with education? So for me, that's been something that's like it's weighing on my shoulders because normal wasn't working for the students I teach. And we
Mm.
were already, my school's already very creative and we tried different things, but I just wonder if there was something that we could have done differently inside of the educational system to meet the needs of our students and to meet the needs of our teachers. Teachers are, so many of us are talking about leaving or moving
Mm.
on or something else. And it's, it's not easy to be a teacher right now. And it wasn't easy to be a teacher before. And I fear it won't be easy to be a teacher in the fall.
Mhm.
Um, so I worry that we've missed this
An opportunity.
opportunity
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
really, our students, like I always tell them, go right. I said, listen, on your resume, you need to write that you're a Zoom proficient because they have different skills now um,
Mhm.
than I had, and that's
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
So that's,
Mhm.
and I say that not to like start arguments with anybody, but I just, education is this brilliant, beautiful thing, and I think we had an opportunity to do something brilliant and beautiful, and I worry that we missed it.
Mhm. Mhm. And the different changes that you guys have made in your school. And I guess, as you said, when you come back in September, we just have to see. It's like one of those things where we have
Yeah.
to walk through it. Because I think about many of the kids who, and in my community, didn't have the access to the Wi-Fi. Didn't, and I'm talking about the adults because I work with adult learners, right? And that was very different from the school kids, where the
Yeah.
school gave them laptops and access and all that, but their parents, right, who were in school trying to get high school equivalencies, trying to do things. For us, you really saw the disparity because they did not have access. They did not have equipment, right? And the shift in them trying to teach their kids. So it was so many different things, the impact of all of it. And for us, we did really good in getting equipment to them and supporting them, right? But there were, I believe that a lot of kids didn't necessarily thrive in that environment. But at the same time, where's the blend here? Because some did. And that's
Yeah.
the thing that I always think about, because there are a group of students that this was ideal for them, right? To be
Yeah,
able
absolutely. Especially for some of our students who are bullied at school, or I went back for my sister's memorial service in Wisconsin 2 weeks ago, and
to.
her stepdaughter shared how much like she actually likes being at home because when she was in person, she was bullied at school, and so being able to be
Mm,
at home was a safe place. But then
mm,
my nephews, who one of them has ADHD, it was really hard for him to learn because he needed the teacher. So I agree, like the blending. I think this is an important time for us to realize what works and how we can improve and to not be so quick to run back to the quote unquote normal or status quo.
mhm,
Nothing about this year is normal, but normal wasn't necessarily working for everyone. And I'm sure that I can think back to 20 years ago, teaching was so different. I was just having a conversation. I used to go to class.
Hmm.
So I graduated from high school in 1996. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but there was no internet. There was no like computers. Our teacher
Right.
had a and he would sit there, he would write on the board like what the assignment was to read,
Hmm.
and then we would all sit and talk and do our work, and he would be reading the New York Times or whatever
Yeah.
newspaper he was reading, and if
Hmm.
we had a question we would go up to him and be like, can you help me with this? But
Hmm.
really there wasn't I don't want to say we were left on our own to figure it out, but we kind of were left on our own to figure it out. And um, I don't know, something about that, it worked for me, and I know that I'm unique, but I also think that teaching has changed, and yet we
Hmm.
want to go back to what it was. And I've been in teaching for 15 years, and teaching needs
You
to change.
right.
I've gone through no
How
child.
okay, so
Yes.
you think I know you're talking about so 15 years ago you taught one way. What's different for you now? What have you seen yourself
Mm.
transition to?
Yeah, I think it's shorter learning. So
Mm.
teachers, I used to talk a lot. I'm a talker. So I used to talk a lot, and now I think
Mhm.
we're realizing that like giving students bite-sized pieces and talking shorter, teachers talking less and students talking more, which
Mhm.
to me does harken back slightly back to what we used to do, 20 some years ago when I was in high school. The problem is that we still have tests, right? And so I'm still all these great ways of letting students talk and learn, but also our students, my students, and a lot of my students are similar to the population that you teach. They're
Mhm.
behind in their reading, their writing isn't strong enough. So when they sit for the exams, and there's a lot of test anxiety, um, so we still have too much emphasis on tests. So that's been something I think has been really, there's a lot in the news about, our graduation rates went up this year because we didn't have the regents.
Right.
And does that like, does that matter?
Right, right. Is that good? And we won't know. How do you tell the difference whether it's good or not good, right?
Yeah.
That we didn't have the reason. And it will take time to see how the kids that didn't do it, what happens afterwards, which we'll have to see. But I think that, yeah, I agree with you that a lot has to change, and we'll see how it will look different as we go on, as time goes on. Because also, when we think about college students, are they opting for college anymore as they did? Because college is very different now, right?
It's so different. And I think that that's also been a change for me. I mean, growing up in the Midwest, like you were just expected, like, couldn't wait to go to college. I couldn't wait to move away from home and have this experience, but that's not the same for my students.
Hmm.
And I think it's, that was something I had to learn as I stepped into this. And I think that's where also when I work with people in my business and we talk about like, what was your expectation and what do you learn? We're allowed to learn and grow. And I'm glad to see students who maybe are saying like, I actually want to investigate being a musician or being
Hmm.
an actress or being a dancer, because those are the things that I didn't do because I was told like the next step after high school is you go to college for 4 years
Exactly.
and then you get a job making
Hmm.
25 or $30,000, and then you
Hmm.
work really hard, and in 20 years you're going to make a lot of money, and that's not reality. And I think it's important that
People
there's
were, but
more
that was told
opportunities.
the truth. I was that education was stressed. If
Yeah.
you want to get anywhere in this world, you need to go and get those degrees. You need to get education. Education was what was stressed for me as the thing, and not from the point of view of dance or theater. And I'm in comedy now, and I'm dancing and doing all
So
these
fun. It
right
sounds like so much fun.
that are just so much fun, right? And I'm really enjoying it. And I wouldn't take anything away from all the things that I've done.
Yeah.
You talked about, so we try to talk and give people support because we talk about mental health, how we heal, how we support people in getting through. You talked about your sister's death and the trauma of that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you use to heal, ways that you are healing, and that things that are supporting you through that may support
Yeah.
others?
Yeah. It came at such a time when like the whole world was in trauma and the whole world was in grief.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I think one of the things that was hardest was to not be able to have that community when, when someone passes away, we typically have a funeral, we celebrate them right away. We did that 14 months later for my sister.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that did help me was starting my business and putting myself in spaces where people were celebrating wins and were working towards self-development and investing in myself, and then also showing up authentically and on social media and in other places and sharing that I was moving through this really difficult time so that other people could share and move through whatever they were facing, whatever losses they were going through. And I think one thing that I didn't do that I wish I had is I definitely didn't talk. I didn't go to see a therapist because it was also like I really am tired of Zoom. I've been on Zoom for like
I
14
know,
months.
right?
And there were days when I was on Zoom from like 8 o'clock until 9 p.m., like 13 hours, right? Because I was always active. But it was surrounding myself by people who were moving towards something in their life. And then also having an outlet, right? When we can't mourn, when we can't grieve, I had a lot of energy that needed to be expended, and we were in COVID.
Mm-hmm.
What could I do? So creating something that was my own has really helped me step forward, and then also to give myself space, like when things didn't go well or when I needed that time to be able to do that. But I've heard from so many people like your story matters, and I haven't been able to share my story until I saw you share your story. And that's been really powerful for me. And I think also, again, I go back to my students, like so many of them have moved through, have, traumatic experiences. And if there's one thing I want to show them as a teacher is that we're all human, regardless of our experience. We all have a human experience. And I have different privileges than they do, but I also am human. And so when I can rely on people and ask for help and get the support and then give that support back, the human experience is what we have in common. And so I remember because I had just started my course last year for social media, and I was like, I'm going to do social media because I won't have to hold space for anyone, right? And then George Floyd was murdered, and all of a sudden I was holding space for community and talking about how do we show up as business owners when this is happening. And it reminded me that we also don't have to have the answers. So the biggest thing I'd say for anyone who's moving through grief is we don't have to have the answers right now. We just have to be willing to take a step forward, even if that step is only an inch. It's still forward.
That's really great. And you mentioned George Floyd, right? You mentioned two words that jumped out of me: privilege, right, and George Floyd. And those, I guess I would combine them in a sense to talk about from your perspective the George Floyd experience and how you felt that how you supported your students right through this, right, and how you were active in that, and where we are now, what you're thinking about is going on now. Where are your students now, the ones that you had to support through this? What's happening?
That's such a difficult question because I think for some of them it affected people like me who identify as white. If we are willing to have our eyes open more to the reality, we see and want to step forward. And for many of my students, they didn't need their eyes to be open to the reality because they were living with it every single day. So for some of them, they didn't want to talk about it. And I remember initially being like, but we should talk about it. And then recognizing that they didn't want to talk about it because this was their life. Like they didn't have to talk about, they didn't have to process, they had to process in a different way than my privilege allowed me to process it. So that's been something I would say it really came to light in January when everything happened in Washington, D.C. And students, that was the first time that I actually saw more conversation happen with our students about race than had happened when last June. And I think it's because it was just so obvious, like how that experience was different. And so we had a lot of conversation about it. I think the biggest thing for me when talking about experiences with regards to police brutality, with regards to racism has just been to allow my students to share and to not be offended. I'll never forget, this is not recent, but we were watching my first or second year of teaching. I taught in Washington, D.C., and we were watching something about Emmett Till. And my student just said, and all my students were Black, and he said, or she said, I forget, man, I really hate white people. And then they looked at me and they said, Miss Monfrey, I'm really sorry. And I said, it's okay. Like, I don't always like white people either. Like, we're allowing that space for that emotion, that anger to be shared is something that I have learned, and it's hard sometimes. On both ends. It's hard when there's anger, and it's hard also when there's apathy. But for me, that's been an important part about being a teacher, is to hold space for all of the emotions that my students bring, and all of my colleagues, because we're all in this culturally relevant space, and it's a journey for each of us. So that's been it's been a long journey, and I recognize also that my journey is so much shorter so far than other people who've been in this fight for a longer time.
That is very, very interesting, the perspective of the whole thing, you know. And a lot of people are healing, you know. Still there's a lot, because I know with me, I went through so many different changes, things that I didn't even realize hit me from so many different places at this time, you know. With all, for me, it's more like, are we still here in this space, right? After all of this, right? For me. And then I look for, you know, that we talk about allies and white people supporting us, and you know, this whole thing. For me, I say, what are you doing? Show me some things, like, you know, it's just creating the committees and all that, and just let's start getting some people in some spaces where things can change and things can happen, right? And so that would be for me where I could see that it makes a difference. And you know, as I came up in corporate in the 80s, so you know, I was busting walls and doing that, right? And then the spirit come back and say, wait a minute, where are we, and what's really happening now? So it's really interesting. So we want to talk about now. Let's see, Monica. So many things, right? I know. I know that you have a movement around healthcare and health education. You want to talk about that a little bit? A movement, I call it, but I know you are. A movement, right?
I mean, I'm still working at finding the words to talk about. So when my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, she was 27, and we soon found out that she had the BRCA1 gene, which is a genetic mutation that makes you 87% more likely to have breast cancer, and also at a higher risk to have ovarian cancer. And I also have the genetic mutation as well. And so part of my work over the past year has also been how to make peace with that. And I just did a post today about this because I got my scan back, and there's no evidence of disease. I had found some cancer cells earlier this year, and there's no evidence of disease right now, which is amazing, because I need to get married in August.
It's just like, I have these goals. You have these goals.
Listen, I'm on a schedule here. But I think what's really, you know, for so long, I've tried to outrun or avoid the things that make us who we are. And I think at this, you know, time, it's saying I have this gene, I have this genetic mutation, and this is how it affects me. And as a teacher, as someone who wants to start a business, who's growing, like, these are some of the things that I'm challenged by. And then finding the words to talk about that this is not, breast cancer just doesn't affect women who are over a certain age or who check off a certain box. My sister was a diagnosis. She was 27 years old. She was a mom to 4. Her baby was 10 months old. Every single thing in here, she had done all the things. She had done the nursing and done all the things that were supposed to protect us. And there's just a lot more cases of women at younger ages having breast cancer and having metastatic breast cancer, which is what she had. So finding those words is hard. It's hard sometimes to talk about it without feeling sad, but also
Mhm.
to remember that the greatest gift I have is my story.
Yeah.
And I tell my students that, right? Like, nobody can take from you your story, your experience. And so
Mhm.
recognizing that my story doesn't define me,
Mhm.
but it allows me to step more boldly into whatever my mission, whatever my journey is supposed to
Learning.
be. So I've been talking more about it. And also to, lots of people say things like, I'm sorry, and you're so brave. And I don't feel any of those things. I just feel like this is who I am. And I want to show that I can step into my full being, and I want you to be able to do the same, whether that is how you identify in your gender expression, in your sexual orientation, in your religion,
Mhm.
in your ethnicity, stepping forward and being proud, and then recognizing that your story is your story. So start telling it.
I love that, and being able to have all the emotions that you have, like you had said earlier, if I'm sad, I want to be sad, and being able to be sad, and then to move to another emotion, not sad all the time, but to just not push it away and really feel what you're feeling as you're going through it. And it's really good when you hear other people's stories, because your story inspires others. So it's like, tell your story, get out there and let people hear that, and that will support others. So that's really cool. I like that. That's a good point about telling your story, right? Um, let's shift to, we have so much to talk about. Look, we have like, I have 5 things, but
Okay.
okay, so I want to talk about now. Okay, so let's talk about, what would you say will be your top spiritual practices, right? And the
Mm.
things that support you, because we talk about, our little spiritual toolkit and what spiritual practices are in it. And it's really
Yeah.
personal, because we each get to choose, what works for us at any given
Yeah.
time in our lives. And it's really like, what tools, how can we navigate this journey, right?
Yeah.
With joy and be happy and get through it all.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to be better at meditating. Not that there's ever like being good. I hear people say this, and there's certain things that haven't, I try and they haven't worked for me. I miss practicing yoga. That was a huge tool for me, and I still think it is. Um, but and this is gonna sound like it's not a spiritual tool, but you gotta walk
Everything
with
is
me here.
spiritual too.
I have found, like, I use the Peloton app, so I ride the Peloton bike and I do the walking, and I find that certain people's the way that they speak reminds me of what I liked when I was attending church, which was the homilies or the pastor's sermons.
Mhm.
Just finding that motivation. So for me, it is listening to motivational and positive words to move me forward. And I think what's been beautiful about Peloton is it also has music in it, which is it takes me to a different place. And I think one of the things I miss about practicing a religion is that communal spirit that you get when you walk in. And we
Mhm.
haven't had that during COVID. And it's part of why I liked yoga, the idea of like, we're all breathing together. So finding ways to practice breath has been really important, whether that is riding the Peloton bike and being in that moment, whether it is, practicing yoga when I can. I was leading classes for a long time still. Those are things that have been important to me. I really still want to try meditation. I'm going to give it another shot.
Doing that this shot. Everybody always talks about meditation is the one. I think we probably put too much energy on it, right?
And I think it's because I'm probably type A and I'm a
Right?
teacher and I like to get good grades. I always wanted to get an A. So I think there's like, well, there must be a right way. And
Right way. Right, right, right.
if I
It's like
sit there
that.
for like everybody's like the spirit, I gotta download, and I'm like, I just sat there and got nothing. So maybe I'm doing it wrong. Um,
I'm all right. You know what's interesting about that? I feel you, because I took classes in meditation. Like, I have a meditation teacher teach me how to meditate, right? And but it's expanded over many years. One person that I had said they started to do guided meditations, and that really worked for them, right? And
yeah,
you said it may not be a spiritual practice, but exercise is a spiritual practice, right? The Peloton. That's
I love me.
exactly right. And you think about when we talk about practices, they are mindfulness practices, right? And
Yeah.
so you could do a walk-in meditation, right? Meditation can be when you're eating, it's like mindfulness practices, right? If you're eating and you're really eating and enjoying the food and savoring it and tasting it, usually we're eating and doing something else, right? So those can be some of the practice, spiritual practices, like. But yeah, I like yours. But everybody says that whole thing about meditation, but a lot of people do it, and I think you're right. It's like there must be a way, and you probably are getting the downloads. You just not recognizing it as a
Yeah.
download, because all the creative stuff is coming from within you anyway. Everything that you're doing and creating. So how are you hearing that though? And so that's what I think when we think about meditation as a place where you kind of can feel like, oh, I'm going to hear get my download and what I'm going to do next. But you get in it somehow because you're moving forward, right?
Somehow I'm keeping it. Yeah. I'm getting there. So those have been like the things that I think are most important in my practice, and also being in nature. We have a rooftop in my building, and I love to sit outside and just kind of. I love because I can actually see the sky, and it's
Oh,
unusual in New York City to be able to see the
please,
sky.
God. I know, right? I had this thing, a funny story. You know how you do the moon, when the moon, and you go out and you do a moon ritual, right? I could not find the moon in Harlem. I was like, they stole the damn moon in Harlem, right? I swear I could not. I went out for 2 nights and I could not find it, right? It's always just so funny to me. So now when I'm looking between and I see the moon, I'm like, yes, it exists.
Yeah, it's so valuable. That outdoor space has really changed. Changed. I think it's important too to remember like space and what the being outside is just so key to our well-being as humans. So.
Mhm. And another thing you said that's really cool too is about being in communication. I love to go to church. When I go home, the music, as soon as I walk in, I'm filled with tears, right? Because the music is playing, the people are there, there's some kind of familiarity that comes over, and I'm just so full. And it's that community, being in community with others is also an important thing that you mentioned. In the practices and the things that you like and work for you. So that's really cool. Those are really key things that a lot of us miss and enjoy and can't wait to get back to some kind of human in
Yeah,
some kind, right?
some kind. It's coming. It's coming.
Right? Like really some kind, right? Um, so before you go, I want you to tell everybody how we can meet you, but I do want you to talk about being a social media strategist and really being out there doing it and making the money, girl. Tell us about
Yeah.
that. And the clubhouse strategies, I went on clubhouse too, didn't know what to do. I keep ending up in these rooms and have to leave quietly, right?
Well, I have a free training for that. So the best way to connect with me is to head over to Instagram, say
Mhm.
hi, land in my DMs. My free training is on how to use Instagram prompts. I have free trainings on Clubhouse. But
Mhm.
really, what I love to work with people is on how to get visible and how to tell your story and how to show up even when it feels like, do I have anything to say? Because we all have something to say.
Mhm.
We need to practice it. And if you're not showing up on social media, you're not showing up on Clubhouse, or you're not doing all the things, it's okay. Just pick one and
Mhm.
do it, a practice, right? We've talked about spiritual practices, showing
Mhm.
up every single day, whether it's for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, has been really powerful for me. It's been powerful for my clients. And we talk about making the money. Like a year ago, I was, selling sessions for $50, and now it's $450. And I think, um,
Oh.
I used to think that people couldn't like, oh, nobody would pay more, or like everybody's like me and they're on a budget. And I'm
Mhm.
realizing that there's two things. Number one, people pay, regardless of if they're on a budget or not, because I certainly buy things I don't need and I'm on a budget. And then also, we need to stay out of people's wallets, right? Like, just
Mhm.
because my price is my price, I shouldn't be changing my price because I think someone can't afford it because of what I think about them, whether they're a teacher and I assume that all teachers don't have money, or I make an assumption because of, their experience in life. Like, we don't need to be inside of someone's wallet. If someone can't afford it, then we go from there. But one of the things I learned was charge what you're worth. I'm
Mhm.
actually in Rachel Rogers. I don't know if you know who she is, but she wrote the book We Should All Be Millionaires.
Okay.
She made $1 million last June. I think she's made $1 million many times over now. But I'm in her community, and she shouted me out in one of her $1 million addresses. And it was in February. I had a $25,000 launch for a program that I was running.
Mhm.
And I did it because I raised my price. And it's so much easier if you're an entrepreneur listening to this. We sometimes think that like it's going to be easy to sell a $17 offer. But if you want to make $1,000, you have to sell a lot of $17 offers versus if you just raise your price to $170 or you raise your price to $270, it's going to be a lot easier to make that income, and then you don't have to work so hard. I didn't create a side business to work as hard as I do, and I want to impact more people. So again, I look back to where I was a year ago, and I was, gosh, who's going to pay me $50? And now I'm like, this
Well,
is how much it is to work.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now it's more about knowing your worth, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think a lot of people are interested in also is that visibility in social media. So you said you give a lot of free things. What do you actually charge for then? If I could go and get everything free from you, what would I pay you for?
Yeah. So you can get all my trainings and you can come and join my groups and hear me and soak up all of the knowledge. Um, and that's like the teacher in me, right? But the difference is when you pay me, you get me in your business. You get me, my fingers inside of your business and answering all of your questions, and you get that one-to-one support. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting because I think this is where like teaching,
Mhm.
when we were doing the pandemic, we were teaching kids, but we weren't able to like get in their work and say like, here's this is wrong and do this and this would sound better like this. And that's what I compare this to is you can get all the free stuff,
Mhm.
um, but you don't get me. And then here's the other thing that I think is so powerful, and I learned this firsthand.
Mhm.
Currency, so the word for money is currency, right? And currency
Mhm.
comes from current, and current is energy. And so when we invest in ourselves, when we invest in ourselves by investing in an, an opportunity,
Mhm.
then we are putting out to the universe, out to the world, out to the spiritual world, like, I want this to happen. I'm giving energy to it, and then energy will come back. So oftentimes I have clients who will invest in something. They'll invest in working with me or invest in one of my offers, and they'll make their money back because when we like take that step, I firmly believe that the universe or that the spiritual being
Mhm.
that you identify with, it reacts to
Mhm.
meet you.
Right.
And so, sure, you can get all the free stuff in the world,
Mhm.
um, but if you are a business and you only buy free stuff, then you're only going to get free people. Versus,
Right. It's like no, I get it. But say for me, I would like to hire somebody to do it all, right,
yeah.
for me, right? I think, right.
And that's the other thing is like, I actually need to hire somebody to do some of my social media for me because at some point I can't scale. There's only one of me. We have not yet figured out, even though I can be in 2 Zoom accounts at one time, we have not yet figured out how to clone our actual humans. So yeah, I do need to, and that's the other thing is as we grow, like working with me might be more expensive than if you work with my virtual assistant to help do it, but that's like the difference in price. And so I do
Mhm.
think that it's important. I will say this too. If you want to make more money in your business, you have to invest in the systems that allow you to make more money in your business. And that could be
Absolutely.
hiring someone, that
Mhm.
could be, learning Instagram from someone like myself, and then you can go and do it. Or it might be like, hopping in a call with me and seeing if we're working together is the right fit. It's not, and I'm not the right coach for everybody,
Mhm.
but I am the
Mhm.
right coach for somebody. And so if if you've been like, oh, I really want to do this. And I always say to people, I did this
Mhm.
while working full time during COVID with really low prices in the beginning, and gradually like stepping into this is how much it is, because when I show up fully as myself with all of my expertise. I do not hold back from my clients.
Mhm.
Just like I
That,
want you to not hold back from yourself either.
that's beautiful. I know that you were like featured in several magazines, right? And give us a little bit on a summary on what you talked
Yes.
about in those magazines.
Yeah, I was just in Thrive Global and Authority Magazine talking about really how the five things, when you want to start your business and you're working through grief, like what do you need to know? So it's a little bit of a lot of what we talked about tonight.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
and then, there's been sometimes I forget where I've been featured, because the other thing is I recognize that I used to walk around a lot and say, oh, I'm just a teacher. Instead of
mm,
saying like I'm a teacher, and I do really amazing things, and I've had really great opportunities to be in front of people, whether that's as a nominee for Teacher of the Year or something else. But the latest the latest press that I got was to talk really about doing all the things in the middle of a pandemic,
mm.
and with lots. Listen, I always say to God, I know God doesn't give you more than you can handle, but I'm out of shape. We all sat in our butt for a year. So can
Yes.
God take a break? Because I got to ride my Peloton a little bit more.
Right, exactly, right.
Um,
Yeah, that's really, really, really great. It's been so great having you here tonight. Any last words you want to leave people with, and make sure we know clearly how to get in touch with you? I'll call you too. I'm going to set up one of those consultations, right?
yes.
Because
Yeah.
I am new to all the whole social media and the clubhouse, but I think it's really important. And of course, I want to make money like you're making, right? So,
I got you, Rev G. I got you. So if you're looking to connect with me, I'm really easy to find on any social media. I'm at Monica Monfrey, Monicamon, F as in Frank, RE. Clarity, not cute. Oops, lost my
mhm,
headphone.
mhm.
And that is the best way. Just hop into my DMs, whether it's on, I don't use Twitter so much, but so Facebook, Instagram. Instagram is my preferred platform. It's where I hang out the most. Just say, hey, I caught you on Rev G's show, and we will move from there.
Well, I am so happy that you were able to join me tonight, and keep doing all the great things that you're doing. And I am definitely going to be in touch with you. Congratulations on the wedding.
Thank you.
I will totally be in touch. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. I'll chat
Yeah.
with you soon.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. I'm here every Monday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. with guests talking about current events, health and wellness, anything that is currently going on. They talk about their spiritual journeys. My goal is to leave you with information that you can take away and use. And it's really about supporting you throughout your life. What spiritual practices can support you, and bringing different ones and different ideas for you to put in your spiritual toolkit. My goal is to support you in finding joy and living your best life with grace and ease. You can find me here every Monday night, and we're live on Facebook and on YouTube and the WEMS radio app. I'm also on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason, and I'm on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. So you can find me there every day. I'm working through the whole social media thing. So look to see more of me, Reverend G. And I just like to leave you with I love the fact of the health and wellness and the self care. So I'd like to leave you with how well are you taking care of yourself? What are some of the things that you do for self care? It's very important for us to take care of ourselves. It's Reverend G, and I will definitely see you next week on Conversation with Reverend G. Have a